What if I told you the Great Smoky Mountains might be one of the strangest and most unique national parks in America? Well, if I've piqued your interest, keep watching to learn more. Welcome to BearFACTs, where we explore the Smoky Mountains one bear fact at a time. Many people just don't really realize how strange and unique the Smoky Mountains are. I mean, yeah, they are amazing and everything, but once you start exploring the other national parks in our country, you start seeing how unusual they really are. I mean, one minute you're eating pancakes at one of the dozens of breakfast restaurants right down the street, taking photos of black bears casually enjoying a stroll through your hotel lobby, or watching people catch trout in the middle of downtown Gatlinburg, Facebooking about spotting the BMW, and then the next minute you're standing in one of the oldest and most biologically diverse mountain ranges on the planet, all within just a few miles of each other. The funny thing is most of us never really stop to ask why, because the truth is most people just don't get the opportunity to really explore other national parks across the country and just don't realize how strange and unique it really is. I mean, think about some of America's most famous, iconic national parks. Even if you've never visited one, you've probably heard of some of them, like Yellowstone, Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, Mount Rainier, or even the Redwood National Park. And while some are within driving distance of major cities, that's a very different thing from what I'm talking about. You have to really drive to get anywhere from most of these places. You can't literally walk out of your hotel, have breakfast, and then go see Ripley's and then walk into the park. It just doesn't happen. Here's an example. The Grand Canyons may attract millions of visitors a year, but the South Rim, which is the most popular one, is still hours from Vegas. Seattle has spectacular views of Mount Rainier, yet it is nearly a 2-hour drive before you reach its base. The Redwood National Park is connected to small coastal towns, but in order to find any affordable lodging, you have to book months ahead of time just to find a place to stay. It is that difficult. Most national parks are actually the designation themselves. It isn't Dollywood, and then maybe we'll go see the parks. It's the parks themselves. You have to actually drive there intentionally to experience the parks, often getting lost cell phone coverage, and maybe finding roads that are a little old or a little sketchy at times. And many people actually make a full road trip to the destination for the park itself. They're staying there to camp or RV. They're doing it just for the park itself. They aren't doing it to enjoy everything else around the park as well. And that is what makes the Smoky Mountains so unique and so special. Because when people are booking a vacation to the Smokies, they're not just considering the park, they're considering everything around it as well. So how did this happen? Well, the story actually really begins with an industry that almost destroyed the very thing people travel here to see today. By the late 1800s, America's appetite for lumber was enormous. The Smokies were covered with massive old-growth forests filled with chestnut, oak, poplar, and hemlock trees that had been growing for centuries. To lumber companies, these mountains weren't a national treasure. They were an untapped fortune waiting to be harvested. Now, one of the largest operations was the Little River Lumber Company. Instead of simply cutting trees near existing roads, they actually engineered an entire transportation system built deep into the mountains. Miles of narrow gauge railroads snaked through the valley, crossed the streams, and climbed into places that had previously been inaccessible to anyone but those on foot or horseback. Logging camps became temporary towns, complete with boarding houses, company stores, workshops, and hundreds of workers. For the first time in history, much of the Smokies became relatively accessible. Now, while the lumber company industry was actually coming to an end, wealthy tourists from local cities like Knoxville started using the railroads that were in existence to start coming in, and they were building their own little resort towns and homes. Exclusive clubs such as the Appalachian Club and later the Wonderland Club turned Elkmont into one of the Southeast mountain premier resorts. They fished the streams, they hiked the ridges, they hosted dances and entire summers surrounded by the scenery that most Americans had never experienced. So eventually, the logging did slow down, and, well, by then, there wasn't much left to conserve. I mean, they'd already taken most of the fish out of the water, the land had been stripped of a lot of its lumber, and the elk population had been decimated. By then, the national park did step in, and they took over everything. Now, the lumber companies basically didn't have any issue with handing the parks over to the government because they'd already taken everything out that they wanted. They even took the railroads out as well. But in a way, that also helped the development of the park. Because of the railroad systems which they had developed, there were now clear roads and paths that the government later used to develop the roads that you are currently driving on now. Now, it's an important distinction because very few parks had established vacation cultures before they were protected. So by the time Congress created the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in 1934, people were already traveling here simply because they loved these mountains. The roads existed, vacation traditions existed, hotels and boarding houses were already there, and the foundation had been quietly laid out for decades, long before the park even existed. And of course, things even changed more when the automobile started showing up. Families were no longer limited to the railroad schedules, which honestly had already been eliminated outside of Bryson City. All of the railroads inside the park had been completely taken out. So now people had an easy way to get in, they had more reliable means to get from one place to the next, and they had their own means to create their own schedule. It was a win-win for everyone. Now, for a while, that tourism did revolve most entirely around the national park itself, and then someone had a different idea. In 1954, the Gatlinburg Skylift opened and forever changed the relationship between the town of Gatlinburg and the mountains. Rather than asking visitors to hike several miles for spectacular views, Skylift Park brought the views to them. They brought them to the views in a much easier way. They developed one of the first permanent scenic chairlift attractions in the eastern U.S. and provided something incredibly important: a place for people to view the mountains without having to hike them. So people weren't just coming to visit the national parks anymore. Now they're willing to pay for unique ways of experiencing them. That single idea changed everything. Because instead of competing with a national park, businesses discovered that they could complement it. Attractions didn't replace the mountains, they enhanced the vacation experience. People can spend one day exploring waterfalls and wildlife, and then another enjoying scenic overlooks, shopping, restaurants, and entertainment before returning to the park the next morning. And then came another turning point. This turning point happened in 1976 when Ripley's Believe It or Not chose Gatlinburg for what would become the first of many major attractions in the Smokies. It was an unusual investment if you think about it. Gatlinburg still has no major airport or interstate highways going to it, or even ocean fronts to attract visitors. What it did have was America's most visited national park and a huge established tourist industry. Ripley's recognized that millions of families were already coming to the Smokies and wanted more to do after leaving the trails. And their gamble paid off. proving that attractions could complement the national park rather than compete with it. Ripley's had such success in the area that they continue to grow and develop their presence. What many people don't know is that the Greystone Lodge was actually originally built on the side where Ripley's Aquarium sits now. This land was offered up to help build tourism and offer the most unique spectacle in Gatlinburg, an oceanic blue-green landscape deep under the water. Looking back today, it almost seems like it was a remarkable gamble. Most people didn't expect a world-famous entertainment company to invest besides a national park. Yet, Ripley saw something others apparently recognized as well, because millions of families were already visiting the Smokies every year, and many of them wanted more to do after leaving the hiking trails. Of course, Ripley's wasn't the only company to recognize the Smokies' potential. Just a decade later, in 1986, Dolly Parton partnered with the Herschend Family Entertainment to transform the former Silver Dollar City, Tennessee, itself built on the site of the old Rebel Railroad, into what we now know as Dollywood. Rather than starting from scratch, Dollywood expanded the attraction that had already welcomed visitors for years. They elevated it and made it into one of the most celebrated theme parks in the world. More recently, attractions like Anarchista and the continuously evolving Gatlinburg Sky Park have also shown that the spirit of innovation is still alive. Both have reinvented the mountaintop experience with scenic walkways, gardens, restaurants, and immersive attractions. Of course, not everyone sees these changes as a good thing. For some, every new attraction, hotel, or restaurant feels like another step away from the quiet mountain towns they remember. They worry that the Smokies are becoming too commercialized, too crowded, too different from the place that they first fell in love with. And those concerns aren't without merit. Growth almost always comes with compromise. But whether you celebrate the changes or wish things had stayed the way they were before, it's impossible to ignore what they have created. The Smoky Mountains have become one of the greatest tourist destinations in America, a place where families can spend the morning hiking to a waterfall, the afternoon riding a mountain coaster, and the evening sharing a meal before doing it all over again the next day. Few places offer that kind of variety while still protecting hundreds of thousands of acres of wilderness. Perhaps that's the greatest surprise of all. The Smokies never chose between conservation and tourism. Instead, generation after generation found ways to let them grow together. It hasn't always been perfect, and it certainly hasn't pleased everyone. But that willingness to embrace change while never losing sight of the mountains themselves has made the Smokies unlike anywhere else in America. And that's why millions of people return year after year. Not just to see the mountains, but to experience a place that somehow continued to honor its past while reinventing its future. I hope this video helps you plan your visit to the Smoky Mountains. You're getting an honest review from our personal experiences, but facts and things change, so please keep us in the loop if you learn anything new and want to share your experiences in the comments. Thanks again for visiting us at BearFACTs of the Smoky Mountains. Please click that like button and subscribe to our channel.